Hey guys, it's early Saturday morning and the dew is still on all the grass and the plants, so this is the perfect time for me to do two projects for the Bridge Community Garden. The first is I'm actually going to, well, in order, the first is I'm actually going to screen out some wood chips. So in the raised beds, depending on what kind of soil you use, it could dry out pretty quickly. So but you don't want big mulch when you're trying to start new seedlings. So I'm actually going to take some of these wood chips. I'm going to run it through. I have a 1/4 by 1/4 mesh screen, so it's going to screen out really fine pieces of that wood chip, and I'm going to use that as mulch on top of my compost soil that I put on the top of my raised bed, so it doesn't dry out too quickly, because those seeds need to stay a little bit moist to germinate. If they dry out, they're not going to germinate. So that's my plan, but in the process I'm going to end up with a lot of the bigger chunks. And so while I'm doing that, actually on this side over here, I am going to go through just around the field here, and I'm going to collect a whole bunch of greens because I'm going to start a compost pile. I'm really excited. We have all the ingredients we need to start making a really beautiful compost. And since I wouldn't know poison ivy or poison oak if it jumped out and bit me, I am taking extra precautions. I'm going to wear gloves. What I'll do is I'll get some greens and I'll lay them down, and as I'm screening out the wood chips, I'm going to just layer greens and wood chips and get a little bit of a compost pile started here. So I'll check in with you later. So my good friend Mariah over at Cherokee Lakes Farm, they're at the farmers markets every Saturday. Amazing natural produce, high in nutrition. Didn't mean for that to become a plug for her, but I would plug her and Peyton any day. They grow real food. But anyway, she reminded me, she is my mentor when it comes to natural gardening and Korean natural farming and jadam. All things natural, and she reminded me that the soil, because this area has been so untouched for so long, the soil at the base of these trees is probably amazing. And so that's a tip for any of you wanting to fill a raised bed. If you wanted to grab a couple of 5-gallon buckets and come out here and dig around at the base of these trees, that's going to be really good soil. For me today, I'm actually just going to get some and dig it up and put it on top of our compost pile that we started here. It's got great microbes, good healthy soil, and so that'd be a really good kickstart to our compost. Now, ideally, I would be digging at the base of one of these really mature trees. The more mature the tree, the better. But since I have easy access to this one, that's the one I'm going for today. You'll notice I'm being a little bit tentative, and that is just because there's a ton of thorns in there. So trying to get just the top couple of inches and not get too scratched up in the process. If you look around this area, you'll see quite a bit of the soil is dead, dry, and very sandy with a lot of clay as well. But this is one that I got pretty close to that tree, and I want to show you what that soil looks like. That is amazing. And that's what nature will do if you leave it alone and let it do its thing. This is good stuff. So even though the plants this morning had quite a bit of dew on them, by the time I got to layering the compost pile, they were pretty dry and the wood chips were pretty dry. So I went ahead and added some water. You don't want the compost pile to be soaking wet, but it does need to have some moisture. So I'll just check it every once in a while and give it some water if we need to. The other thing, if you're thinking about building your own compost pile, just know this is really not a compost pile yet, and I'll tell you why. Because I did it linearly like this, it's probably only about 8 inches tall right now and about 7 feet long. To really get this to heat up and properly compost where it gets to a temperature, some compost piles will go well over 100 degrees, I think 140 even, and that will kill weed seeds and all kinds of stuff. So that's kind of the ideal, but in order for it to do that, it has to have a certain amount of thermal mass, and most people recommend a 3 foot by 3 foot mass. And that's why when you see those compost piles made out of like pallets and stuff, they're kind of going for that 3 foot by 3 foot. Since this doesn't have that much mass, it's not going to heat up. It's not going to get to that temperature, but I am going to just keep layering it, and eventually it'll get quite tall. I'm hoping maybe at least 30 inches tall, just depending on how much effort I put into it. But with these linear type of compost piles, to me, from what I can tell, they're a lot easier to flip. So my initial thinking right now is once this gets up to a certain height, I'll let it sit for a while, and then literally I'm just gonna roll it over and flip it in the space that I'm gonna leave next to it. And we have the materials to keep doing this. So my thinking is we'll just keep creating new rows and just keep leaving space to flip them. If this was a traditional compost pile that heated up, from what I can tell, flipping it a couple times is usually sufficient. And but with these more linear type, sometimes you have to do it a little bit more often. We'll just see how it's breaking down, see how it's doing. But the idea is that we'll end up with a whole bunch of these piles going at different stages, and hopefully this first one will be ready before too long for us to start using on our raised beds. The other thing I want to show you is the screenings. This is what I'm going to put on top of my raised bed, and then I'm also going to create a pile for anybody else who has a bed in the Bridge community garden if they want to use it as well. I do recommend only putting it on top. Don't till it into your soil. There is some differing opinions, but the general consensus is if you mix wood chips in with your soil, as those wood chips break down, they'll actually tie up nitrogen. Some people that garden that I really respect don't think that's necessarily a problem, and my logic tells me if you're worried about that, then you can just add more natural nitrogen. So totally whatever you think, but if you want to play it safe, just put these wood chips. They're really meant to be a mulch, and they're meant to go on top just to hold the moisture in and protect the soil. So I'm going to show you what that looks like after I screened it. So this is our wood chip pile after I screened it. So it's nice and thin, and that is not going to prevent any seedlings from popping up through the soil, but it will hold in the moisture and it will add some good organic material. So I'm gonna head over and spread that on my raised bed. And if you are interested in following along with the Bridge Community Garden, as every YouTuber says, like this video and subscribe to the channel. This is going to be just one playlist on the Bridge channel. We have incredible sermons and teaching and other events going on, so it's definitely worth hitting that subscribe button. So thank you guys.